We are recording. All right, so like I said, thank you so much for coming to the LOREX webinar, talking about the Handbook for International Research Advice. And so the first thing I'd like to do is introduce the writers of this document. We had 10 cohort members from our first cohort that gathered together, pooled our resources, our memories, and our thoughts. So I'm one of them. We also had Hannah here. We had Matt. We had Trista, Angelique, Emily, Chelsea, Keiko. Let's see. Then we also had Ashley. I think that's actually everybody. Yep, Emily, Hannah, Ashley, Chelsea, Ilea, Marina. Oh, Marina. Marina is going to show up halfway through. She said Trista, Angelique, Keiko, and Matt. So yes, it was a team effort. It was really wonderful. So initially, I was going to have us introduce who we were, you know, what universities we were at, what country sites, but we already did that. So instead, the last thing I want all of us to have a chance to tell you is our best memories from LOREX. I feel a lot of us bonded during this time talking about our memories, the good and the bad. So I'm just gonna start off and then everyone can jump in when they feel ready. But my favorite memory during LOREX was around probably 1 o'clock in the morning, all of us going to get food together in Dalhousie area. There was poutine, and we had a friend tell us you have to get it with stuffing on top. And it was like Thanksgiving in my mouth, and it was wonderful. That was my favorite memory during LOREX, was getting food with my cohort. Who wants to go next?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I really liked Nova Scotia. Just in general, I liked being able to get away from my home institution in Miami and go somewhere where it's not 100 degrees every single day. So that was super nice, and also kind of turning it into both a research experience, but also kind of a mini vacation where you can kind of explore and see things that you don't often have the chance to see.
My favorite memory happened probably right at the beginning of the trip. I rode the overnight train from Stockholm to Abisko, which is like a 10-hour ride. And yeah, like I said, it's overnight, but we're far enough north that the sun didn't quite go down. And as we creeped farther and farther north, the sun kept not going down. And I wasn't used to that. I've never experienced the midnight sun before. And so I stayed as long as I could in the dining car, just like reading a book and trying to figure out how I'm going to go to sleep with a train car full of Russians who didn't want to put down the blind. Anyway, so a couple locals came and talked to me, and they were really curious, like, what language book are you reading? I said, oh, it's English. They're like, oh, you're American. And we started talking a lot, and I really connected with this one lady who was actually commuting weekly from Denmark to a village about halfway on the train ride. And we started talking a lot, and I told her, I think Swedish is a really beautiful language. I'm interested in picking up as much of it as I can while I'm here. And she's like, oh, excellent. Ask me anything. Like, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about my language. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going here to study lakes, so lake would be a great word for me to learn. I asked her, what's the Swedish word for lake? And I'm not even going to try. It turns out the Swedish word for lake is just a combination of all of the sounds that an American mouth cannot make and nothing else. And we spent like 20 minutes absolutely cracking up on this train at 11 p.m. Nobody else was awake, like trying to teach me how to say this impossible word. And the dining car hostess actually had to politely ask us to leave. And that was a really excellent welcome to the north for me.
I can go. My memory from Sweden, from Obisco, was going shopping the first day in that little store that we walked to, and realizing how half of the store, even more, was just candy. It was like bins and bins and bins of candy.
I can share two real quick. One is just my field work in Australia was like just so easy. We had so many people and everyone was so helpful and industrious and had something to contribute, and we all got along, that even though like the field aspect could have been very challenging, we just were such a great team together, and that was such a pleasant experience. I guess secondly, just exploring the Australian nature. The animals are awesome, really unexpected, and yeah, that was pretty fun.
I can talk about my favorite memory from Obisco. My fieldwork was looking at diel patterns in nutrient concentrations in streams. So it involved like 24-hour sampling, and that involved just like camping and getting up every 3 hours to go sample streams. And so it was a really great way just to see all of like the wilderness that Obisco has to offer, and got to spend all summer looking at the midnight sun. So that was really fun. It's probably one of my favorite memories. So. Besides the sleep deprivation, but I caught up.
I can go. So it's hard for me to pick like my best memory. I know that the 4 of us that were in Lismore actually earlier this year, we tried to take like weekend trips to new places and go on like new adventures. And every single time we went somewhere, there was like definitely a different experience. We encountered a lot of things we were not prepared for. But I think my favorite memory was actually when we were in Coffs Harbour. I was with Angelique and then Rachel, another member of the LOREX cohort, along with my 2 advisors. And we were sitting around the dinner table. Rachel had made tacos for us. She actually drove from Lismore to Coffs Harbour to like prepare this nice meal for us after a long day of research. And we just sat around and we talked about Australian slang. Like for a couple hours, we were just sitting around talking about different slang in Australian and comparing like different cultural differences, because the 5 of us were from all different parts of the world, and that was probably my best memory.
Well, I can go now. I have too many great memories from my exchange, but I would like to highlight 2 very quick. One of them is Keiko's advisor took me to this natural reserve in Coffs Harbour, and it was packed with kangaroos with me, and they were like hanging out normal in the park, like you can even touch them if you feel like it. And that was very shocking for me, because I wasn't expecting to see too many kangaroos in a same place, and actually that you can engage and interact with them. So that was amazing. And the other memory that I have is me trying to surf. It was a disaster, but it was a great disaster. Yeah, I remember that the next day I was so sore, like all my body was so sore. So yeah, that's me.
All
Okay, I think I'm
right.
last.
Yeah, go for it, Emily.
Yeah, so I liked the little day trip that we took to McNabb's Island. So Chris Algar, the Dalhousie coordinator, arranged a little day trip for us, and we took this little boat across the harbor, and we just paid the guide like 20 bucks each or something. It was a little sketchy, but we made it there safely and went for a day hike and had a picnic, and then went back on the same boat. Some of us went swimming in the water, but it's still pretty cold in Nova Scotia. So I think it was like 3 of them jumped in the water.
So yeah, as you can tell, we have a lot of, memories, and a lot of them they had to do with, general logistics or the culture. And that's kind of what sparked this idea. We had gotten an idea to write a bulletin article that never really went very far. And we were discussing all the things that we wish could have been different during our first cohort experience. And we had several ideas about what would happen at the conference, what we wish was, had given us more time to do this and less time to do that. And it was Matt and Emily. I have a distinct memory of you two mentioning these handbooks, these living handbooks. So can either of you two talk about why you brought that up and what they were used for in your labs?
I don't remember this conversation at all. So I have no idea. But basically, FIU has this living handbook that they give out to all incoming PhD students. And it's basically about life in Miami, things you need to know before you come down, like housing stuff, car insurance, getting a driver's license. We have a special section for international students, things like that. So I think the conversation was, some schools have this, we could create this for international students from US institutions that are going to other places. Just kind of a how-to guide.
Yeah, I think it kind of started with us being like, wouldn't it be nice if we had some handbook to guide us through our travel experiences? Because we kind of just had to do it by trial and error as we went. And then I guess it occurred to us, like, why don't we write it? So we just did.
So yeah, it was, right before or right during when COVID hit in March here, that we had finished up our bulletin article. I had sent it to Adrienne to get her feedback, and she's saying, well, it's not very different from the first article. Adrienne, do you remember this? You want to tell us, you want to talk about? No? But she was saying, there were parts of it at the very end when we were discussing what we could have changed, talking about mentoring and what we could have done, how could we explore that? And after she said that, I emailed Emily and I said, Emily, how you mentioned this, handbook? Wouldn't it be fun if we did this? And I've got a lot of stuff going on in my life, so why don't you head this up? Emily, do you remember this?
I do remember you foisting responsibility on me, but I took it on gladly.
It's true. It's true. Emily was a champ. I was like, this is a good idea, but I don't have a handbook. I have never even thought about writing this. So Emily seemed to be a good person to pawn this off of. And that's when COVID hit. And initially, Emily had mentioned, maybe we should wait a little bit. And I was like, yeah, that's probably a good idea. But she proceeded to email our cohort and be like, hey, would anyone be interested? We had no idea how much interest we would actually get. And we had a fair few respond. We were pretty happy with the number. And Emily emails me again and says, actually, all these people say they're interested and life just exploded. So why don't we try to start working on this? And we scheduled a meeting pretty much every Friday afternoon. That was the time that most of us could gather together to discuss this. So does anyone here, the writers, want to tell their experience about like seeing this email and going, yeah, I could participate?
I guess I'd been involved with other handbook type things before, so I was like, sure, why not? This sounds fun. It's a good opportunity to see everyone again, especially because it was actually coming off of the Ocean Sciences meeting. So I was kind of excited to talk more with people again.
I remember that my comment was, this sounds like an amazing idea. And I looked at the names of people who said, yeah, I'm interested. And what my suggestion was, well, we're missing people in Israel. Let's try to recruit someone, send an email and ask them. So, and I think Ashley was really nice to say, yeah, I'm busy, but I'll do it. We had a small group that went to Israel that year.
So yeah, we had these meetings every Friday, and during this time we were, in my opinion, we were bonding. I mean, we would gather together for about an hour, and at least the first half an hour, we would just be talking about our experiences, the stories that you've heard now, and then we would get into the meat and potatoes of the handbook and be like, all right, so what goes into this handbook? And we started brainstorming ideas, and every week we tackled one one concept. The first one was getting chapter ideas, and then it was chapter by chapter we would go. And so just to give you a rundown, we had chapter 1 being initiating a collaboration. Chapter 2 was transporting scientific equipment and samples. Chapter 3, visas and forms. Chapter 4, logistics. Chapter 5, cultural considerations. And then we had appendices for custom forms, alternative funding sources, schedule and research plan examples, supply list examples, some travel restrictions and bans because of COVID. And then finally, if all else fails, just calm down, relax. And I really liked splitting the sections. We first tackled it as groups, like all of us together on one chapter, and then we split into pairs to work on other sections. So does any of the writers want to talk about their experiences working chapter by chapter as a big group, or when we split up into pairs of 2?
I can comment on kind of what you were talking about before and the question you just posed. Like, I looked at this opportunity to kind of build my network, because, a large group of us went to Obisco. I think there were 11 or 12 of us, and then I wanted to do this handbook, and I signed on with everyone and was like, oh yeah, I forgot everyone was part of this, because it's like the cohort. So I just only imagined that I would be with Hannah and the people from Sweden. And so it was really fun to get to hear like everyone else's kind of like story and experience, because we all went to different parts of the world, and just like culturally and the things they experienced, it was like really cool to hear about that. And then I think kind of from the anecdotes we kind of talked about over these Friday meetings is kind of how we divided up the sections, and be like, oh, it sounds like you had a lot of experience with like paperwork and visa and customs, so like maybe you should work on that one. I think that's kind of how we like allocated the different sections.
Yeah, it was really fun to see what everyone else's experience was, especially the people that we didn't see every day, like the people that didn't go to Dalhousie. I didn't really hear about, what life was like in Sweden. My dog is dreaming right now. I don't know if you can hear. But yeah, anyway, it was fun when we started working on it to kind of break up the sections into groups, because we were able to pretty easily tackle each object. And it didn't ever really feel like work. It kind of just felt like we were logging on at the end of the week to a Zoom call for more of a happy hour type situation. And then, we did a little bit of work on the side, but it was more sharing of our experiences. And by splitting up to groups, we were able to focus on specific things 1 week at a time. Made it flow pretty easy.
Yeah, just going off of what Chelsea and Matt were saying, it was really cool for us to just talk about like our experiences in the different locations, but also see how there were a lot of similarities between the different locations, or the way that the different countries are kind of run, or like things that were surprising to us in one place were also surprising to another cohort member in a different place. And then also I think the science aspect of it, seeing how science is done in different countries and comparing our experiences, was really cool. It's really cool to see how everything was done.
I'm not gonna lie, I think that was probably one of the most difficult parts of writing this handbook, was recognizing that there was a lot of similarities, and how do we structure it? How do we separate out what was country specific to what was common among them all? What did you guys think about that?
I think we probably repeated ourselves a lot. And a lot of things that ended up in our universal advice section, I'm sure got repeated in our country specific sections and every other country specific section. But I think that's what makes this beautiful as a living handbook, as it can evolve over time and over uses, and more people start contributing. I think it'll be even easier to see what is location specific and what is universal.
Yeah, I agree that we had a lot of redundant info, but I don't think it's the worst thing because it just means it's super important and you can find it in multiple places. And we did spend quite a significant chunk of time just like editing it down over the weeks. And each week we'd be like, are we done yet? And then we'd realize that we still had more to do. So then we would regroup. But all in all, it didn't take as long as I thought. Like we started, as Ilea mentioned, when COVID began essentially, and I think it only took us a couple months to do the whole thing, maybe 3 months at the most, which is like way faster than I thought it would take to churn out such a handbook. And of course it will be added to, so it's not a final product, but a product we're happy with at the moment.
So I guess the next question is that I pose to the writers is, what do you hope the students get out of this? And I'm not gonna lie, I am biased to the section that I probably put the most time into, which was initiating that collaboration and writing up, how do you reach out to that collaborator or your advisor? And I think that section to me was huge. I remember, going through the struggles of like, how do I reach out? And, there's no set manual that I knew of at the time, being like, okay, what are my step processes? And so I hope that the students out of all of this take away the first chapter, initiating that collaboration. It's huge. What about you guys?
Yeah, I think that sets our handbook a little apart from other things I've seen, because I haven't seen like a template or a procedure you could, or best practices for initiating an international research collaboration. It's more so like what to expect once you're already there, or what is like etiquette once you've made it, but not like how to get there.
Yeah, I hope it's helpful to someone, and that maybe it can reduce the stress of trying to plan something like this, and or help someone be more prepared. We have a lot of kind of tidbits in there of like useful things to bring you may not think about, or where has good food. And I think all of that really plays into the experience when you're there for a month or two.
I hope that future readers, in knowing that this handbook exists, can go into their projects thinking about how things other than their science can be improved. I know I went into my LOREX experience thinking only about science. Like I was really excited to do science in a beautiful place, but I was thinking about my project and not a whole lot else. And I came out of it, thinking about science communication, thinking about networking, thinking about, this broad community of scientists globally and how that changes over different cultures, and trying to figure out how to communicate that. And so I want other students to come out similarly thinking about how to communicate this and how to start thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I would say similar to what other people have said, that'll just help students become more prepared, because I know there were a lot of things in Australia that I wasn't prepared for, but I didn't know what I didn't know. So like I got there and I was like, oh, I guess I should have considered all this stuff, but it was my first like international exchange, so I didn't know like what I necessarily needed to prepare to be there. But I hope through our handbook and our experiences that we provide, that the next cohort will be better prepared than we were when we first got there.
Yes, I echo Trista and Keiko and what they say. I think that we did something very, very great, and I think very important for the following cohorts. And I hope that you use it and you read it, because I think that we provide a lot of great information. And especially for me, and that was something that I really struggle a lot, it was with the shipments and like shipping my samples and getting materials there. That was something that I wasn't highly aware when I was preparing myself for the exchange. And that's something that I deal with in Australia. However, having this information beforehand now, I think it's going to be very helpful for the following cohorts. So read it and use it as a guide.
So
Yeah, and I
are
think-
there, oh,
sorry.
sorry, Matt, go.
I was just going to say, and I think moving forward, it'd be cool to see that grow because everyone's going to have a different experience, even if you're going to the same place. So right now it's, what was it, 10 of us, I think, worked on it. It's basically 10 of our opinions / experiences. It would be cool to see that expand. And when it expands, it's going to help more people.
But particularly certain sections of it will change just because of travel restrictions and requirements. So like the first cohort that went to Australia, they went on a tourist visa because that was completely okay, legal, acceptable. Now Southern Cross changed their requirements and they want people to come with some kind of it's not exactly a research, but some temporary research visa that is different. So there's all sorts of things that by the nature of the changing world will change and will have to be updated.
So that kind of concludes like the questions that I had for the writers. Are there any other additional questions that you guys as the writers want to ask each other, or comments you want to make before we move to the breakout rooms? All right.
Idea, maybe
yeah.
before we move to the breakout room, maybe the new cohort or the second cohort has questions for everyone before we split.
So we put it to you, cohort 2. Do you guys have any additional questions? You can take some time to think about it.
Is there anything that you guys feel like you learned like in the writing process of like working with a group of peers? So I guess like where that question comes from is I just wrote a document with a group of peers and I was like very surprised at the difference between that and like working with like my groups of like collaborators who are at all different career stages. Like did anything like communication with each other wise come out that was helpful?
I'm going to give props to Emily. I feel like she was a very efficient group leader and director each week, kind of sending out like action items, like this is what you need to have done for your section, and not individually, but just this is what we talked about, and kind of try to have your thing done. But I felt like it was one of like the most efficient collaborations I've been a part of, which was really nice. But maybe that's because we weren't like analyzing data or anything, but I would give props to Emily on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's because we tackled it in manageable chunks and we met so regularly, like basically every single Friday afternoon. So it never felt overwhelming just to send like a little bullet list of like, this is what we're doing and these are your homework assignments. So yeah, just really breaking it into really tiny chunks. And then we made such incremental but fast progress.
But partly is figuring out what these chunks were. So the first meeting where you all brainstorm what would be the content or the chapters or whatever, the little subheadings for that, which I think, if I remember well, that took at least 2 or 3 meetings. And after that, things seem to flow faster.
From my perspective, I think in general, it was a great experience. And from a collaboration perspective, I think that having this opportunity to write this handbook for me provides me another like point of view of collaboration, and also it provide me other skills, again, collaboration related, because I believe that you need to adapt and change your techniques or skills when you are collaborating with different people. For example, we collaborate and work in a way as a graduate students and also as a LOREXers. And parentheses, I think that we were very diligent. We did great, but also this type of skills that we gain here working in this handbook are not the same, or maybe are not similar to the ones that we implement working with our collaborators. So in conclusion, I believe that having this opportunity provide us like another point of view of collaboration and collaborate with your peers as a graduate students. And I think that's very positive.
Yeah, I think this was a pretty easy collaboration in that there wasn't a whole lot to disagree with, because we were all just kind of sharing our experiences, and we all of our knowledge is kind of built on each other. Whereas sometimes when you're writing a manuscript, you're trying to cut back and decide what's important. But I would say that there needs to be somebody that, like Emily, who can prioritize information and delegate to kind of take the lead, so that we're not all just kind of doing our own thing. But you definitely need somebody to direct, I think is the best way to do this.
Yeah, but I think buy-in and responsibility and accountability of all participants was part of it. Because, you know, I don't think Emily would have enjoyed leading this if she would have said, okay, do this week, and nobody would actually follow through.
Yeah, that was the great part. I just would like write out our marching orders, and then everybody pretty much did it every single week. So I didn't have to chase after anyone. And I probably would have gotten really tired of that if I had to.
I definitely agree with pretty much everything y'all have just said. This entire experience working with you guys as peers has really like reinvigorated my trust and ability to professionally rely on other people. The dynamic is a lot different than like a class project where, you know, there's clearly one student who cares and clearly 5 students who don't. Or when you're working with professors or your advisor where, you know, one person is clearly more knowledgeable than the other. All of us working together, I feel really encouraged that I was able to like rely on other people and trust that I'm doing my best job, you guys are doing y'all's best job, and we can come together and sort of like give and take in an equal capacity. It was really, really cool.
So if I could hop in here now to go back to the bulletin. So I'm hearing a bulletin article as you guys are talking, because now that you've like, I was just jotting down all of your notes about, you know, how this collaboration worked so well and why it worked well and what are some of the elements of it working well. And yes, the stakes were a little bit lower, but I think you now know how well a collaboration can work and what some of the elements of success are. And hopefully you can take those into your next collaboration, which maybe does involve data analysis, maybe does have some more difficult personalities or, you know, some jostling for position that you don't have now. But I think it would be, if you guys still want to write a bulletin article, highlighting that the handbook is done and that these were, you know, this is an unexpected, you know, again, this reminds me of Keiko and Angelique's article about unexpected collaborations. Like the whole point of LOREX was to take you guys and send you to another country to collaborate with people over there. But I love this collaboration that's happening with you together as a cohort. And hopefully this will extend into the second cohort as well. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there as an option. I think it would be great.
All right, Emily.
No rush.
I'm not opposed to the idea.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we should do it.
No author charges.
Well, particularly if Adrienne shares her little notes, because she was looking from the outside and making these notes, that would be a great start.
Yes. And the other thing, I was messaging Ilea. So if with you guys' permission, I would love to get a, because it's great to see the cohorts intermingling and to have you guys all here. I would love to get a screen capture with all of us smiling, if that's okay, so I can tell the world and we can put it on the LOREX page that everybody's here. So on the count of 3, if I can get this going. Okay, everybody say cheese. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna, Ilea, I don't know if you have anything else. I'm opening the breakout rooms, theoretically.
Yes. So one, I want to make a comment. We're all muted. How many people actually said the word cheese?
Oh,
I saw 0 mouths move. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody did.
I was wondering if my
Um,
internet froze. I was like, uh-oh. I was like, whatever.
But yes, just to wrap it up before we go out into the breakout rooms, and what we really hope that you get out in the breakout rooms is asking any more logistical questions, cultural questions that maybe you haven't asked before, maybe you haven't read the document yet, and maybe you want to be pointed in a certain direction if you want to look at those examples. So that's really what the breakout rooms are for. But before you do, we just want to reiterate that, check out this handbook. There's a lot of good pieces of information in it. And once you guys travel, we really do hope that you contribute because, as Matt said, it is just 10 of our ideas and experiences. And with more additions, it can become even more. So definitely keep that in mind once you travel. All right, so you should see now at the bottom of your Zoom, the more ... If you click join breakout room, you can select which country site specific you want to go to. If anyone here, is anyone from going to Israel? No? Okay, so yes, we have 3 countries. Join the breakout rooms, and once you are done, you're welcome to pop back into the main session and say goodbye. But otherwise, I'm going to stop recording, and thank you all so much for participating.